Joining me today in the studio here in London, Emmet Gates. Happy birthday, pal.
Cheers, buddy.
Dan, you're going to sing to him. Dan Cancian also joining.
I'm not going to sing to him, but happy 21st birthday, mate.
Cheers, pal. I appreciate it.
I've got the Torino on Dan. I've got the Juventus on Emmet. And I'm wearing the old Como strip from the 80s, Matteoli. And there's a reason behind that, because today we're talking about Como. They've stayed up. First attempt, the salvezza, the survival. And now we're going to get into the nuts and bolts about how they did it. Dan, I'll throw it to you on the top few performers.
Yeah.
Name a few names who you think have given them.
They've had a few. They've had the likes. Obviously, you could probably go to a list of like 4 or 5 names, which speaks volume to the quality of the squad.
The most prominent?
Nico Paz, I'll say you can't look past him. It's been superb. I will say it's probably been the best young player in Serie A this season.
Yeah, and linked to so many clubs. Inter want him. Everyone wants him.
Yeah.
Real Madrid. I mean, that deal that Como have with him, we'll see if he stays. I mean, they've already come out and said their sporting director, Carl Alberto Ludi, said that he's not going anywhere in the summer. So that's going to be good if they can hold on to him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's going to be good for Como and it's going to be good for Serie A because players like him are rare.
Yeah.
They are rare. He's been superb. Like, just a breath of fresh air, you know, like great going forward. In between the lines, he's got the sort of the knack of always find a pocket of space, and he always looks like he's got a couple of more seconds on the ball than other players. And it's been a thrill to watch. And then obviously you've got the likes of Patrick Cutrone, you know, the local hero, 7 goals this season.
Big first half of the season for him.
Yeah, 7 goals this season, which is the most he's scored in top flight campaign since his days at AC Milan. Diao, what his signing has been in January, coming in 8 goals in 15 games before he a serious injury curtailed this season. I think when you look at Diao, you have to make a case for him to be the most impactful signing in January.
We spoke about that a couple of months ago. Top 5 signings from the January window.
Como spent big in January. They spent more than any other club in Serie A.
But equal, what was the other club? Was it Roma? No, it was
AC Milan were close second. Yeah.
Again with 48, 49 million.
Yeah.
Clubs.
But you look at the impact that Milan signings have had, or rather not have had, and you look at the impact that Como signings have had in their season.
Well, I mean, I think the bar is set high for Milan. Obviously, salvation is what Como's objective is. And we've seen the transition from the first half of the season to the second, where when they went bigger in the January window, traditionally, Serie A clubs don't really spend that much in the January window. But look, when you've got the means and you've got the ambition to stay up and you've got what I consider a big plan to sort of be there, ever present in the top flight, these days, some of the other clubs, they can't keep up with clubs that want to spend. So Lecce, the Venezias, and clubs like the Empolis are not going to be in that same ballpark. And Como, they got the job done.
And it's interesting when you look at it because, for example, like when I compared this win to when Jurgen Klopp took over Liverpool, he had those 6 months of sort of like getting his feet under the table. And then by August, by his first full season, they were ready to go, hitting the ground running. And, it was transformational for the club. And I do wonder whether this second half of the season could have the same effect on Como, because with their signings in January, as you said, they spent big, but they were smart signings. They weren't panic buys,
and there weren't any big players there. I mean, there were good players in other leagues, but they were just steady, good, solid players.
And they went for youth.
Yeah,
players with huge potential that they could maybe sell
they
on in 2 or 3 years.
And now
there's a project.
They have a much better platform upon which to build. So I do wonder whether they've sort of stolen a march on some of their closest rivals.
I think they have, because when you compare that kind of expenditure to one of the other clubs in the bottom 10 clubs, we'll say even Torino, the big traditional clubs in Italy are not going to. Obviously, they've been set up for decades, and they have youth systems in place. There's an academy project at Como that they've just started up in the last couple of years. Now they've got the women's team. They've got a training center that's first class. They've now, starting to develop the media center. So all this investment's coming in, and I don't want to say that translates to the field, because it doesn't. It doesn't necessarily, because Palermo City Group is the same project down there. They're in Serie B. They're not really moving in strides the way Como have. But I think it is about that. The transfer windows they've had. And Cesc Fabregas said after the win over Genoa how, to get to this salvation, it took 3 very good transfer windows. And he's obviously talking about January back to the summer, and then the January window before that, where it was like, the names like Simone Verdi were coming in. And let's not forget, getting to Serie A, they didn't spend big money to get there. It was it was passo dopo passo, more or less. It was, let's take it one time, one step at a time. Even, I remember seeing an interview with Fabregas talking, I think it's the Sky Sport, one of the English broadcasters, and he was saying how the 3-year project is to get to Serie A. Then all of a sudden they're there because they had a very good run of results, shaky end to last Serie B season, and they didn't have to go through the play-off process, which helped them. That win over Cosenza at the end to get there and achieve it with one round to go. Now, Cutrone, 14, 15 goals. Strefezza, players like D'Acunha, these are players that were there. Some of them were in Serie C. Gabrieloni there in Serie D. So they still held on to that heritage to get, and Gabrieloni scoring against Roma in Serie A. I mean, that's one of the fairy tale stories for me.
Yeah, scored in every division with Como.
Yeah. So there has been a path there for those that don't know the ascent and how they got there. I don't think that they were expecting to be in Serie A this soon. And then when they got there, they jumped at the chance.
Yeah, they've been smart about it. Also because I think a byproduct of them signing so well is that they can sell well, because the likes of Nico Paz and obviously Como will want to hang on to those players. But as you said, they are attracting interest from the likes of Inter Milan. Bigger clubs are going to come in. And at the moment, you can see that clubs the size of Como, they can build their entire business model on that sort of scenario where we sign players on the cheap, we develop them, and then at some point we sell them on to big clubs for great money. The likes of Brighton are doing, the likes of Brentford are doing it brilliantly in the Premier League. Obviously, you've got a lot of clubs in the sort of mid-range in Italy as well. They've done that.
I mean, Atalanta perfected that for years before this recent run.
Udinese before them as well, yeah.
If you're going to come in and invest money into a league, of course you're going to have a look at the success stories and then emulate those. Yeah. Not just copy them, but try and emulate them and maybe improve on them, or bring in some of the knowledge that you have. Every club now has their data teams where they go around and they scout for players, or they use software to get the players that they need. And I think that's what Como's done in their summer and January transfer window, because to bring in a player like Kakare, no one saw that coming. I wouldn't have expected any other Serie A clubs to go for him. And all of a sudden he's in with a club that's struggling in the bottom 3. I think overall they spent 6 or 7 weeks in the bottom 3. And there was that period where a lot of people on social media were saying they're going straight back down. Mm. And of course, when you bring in 4 or 5 solid signings in a January window for reinforcements, because we all know the bottom 6, 7 clubs, if they don't have that depth, that's where they really struggle in March, April, May, especially if you get a couple of injuries. Look at Benabe at Parma. Mm-hmm. Once they lost him, I mean, poor Pecchia. I mean, apart from Jinx, Dan over here.
Yeah, Dan interviewed him, and that was it, the kiss of death.
I'm surprised at what you've gone so far into the episode without mentioning. So thank you. Well, the listeners will appreciate that.
Well, it is my birthday, so I'm being nice on you.
There is that.
Got full reign here. Let's have a look at some of the names that they had in 2023-24 and compare them. Gioacchini didn't play much on loan from St. Louis City. Then there was Semper, who ended up at Pisa, and he's going to come up with them. So you got the Como up now with Pisa. Cherry was there, Alberto Cherry. So these are the players that they brought in that January window last year to help them get that promotion. And as we all know, as the official broadcaster of Serie B, that most of the signings are free signings or loan signings.
Or loan signings, yeah.
Or you spend, I think some of them are like 20,000 euros, 100,000 euros. I think the 4 million for Palermo this season for Poyampolo, and that is the big signing of the year.
Clubs in Serie B don't spend money.
No, they operate on a budget and not out of choice, but out of necessity. And I think that the key thing is that it must be very difficult to manage a club that is trying to get to Serie A or to win promotion from any league, because you need better players than your rivals to win promotion. But the fact that they are better players, there's no guarantee that they're going to be good enough to keep you up.
Absolutely. Look at Salernitana. Yeah. Look at players. I mean, Parma struggled. We looked at that team. They won Serie B quite easily last season. It doesn't mean you're going to survive Serie A. We all know that. But go on.
Because you do have players, and we've obviously seen them all this season covering Serie B. You do get players that are very good for Serie B, but they struggle to adapt to Serie A to make that leap. And so, as Dan said, you the players that get you up are not necessarily good enough to keep you in Serie A when you get there. So it is important then.
There's a big difference between the pace of Serie A and Serie B and the coaching. Like you'll come up, like Fabregas would have found it very difficult to come up against a lot of those coaches.
He did say that in an interview that when we interviewed him earlier this season, he did say that it was a completely different world, the step up from Serie B to Serie A. And I think he deserves enormous credit. I think it's actually been interesting to see the shift in dynamic because Fabregas was one of the story of the season at the beginning of the season because, obviously, phenomenal career as a player. And there he was making his managerial debut in Serie A. I think he's handled it brilliantly because, as you said, there were times, particularly at the start of the season, where you looked at them and you thought they don't have much about them. They could be going straight down, but he stuck to his principle, his tactical ideas. And it was like, we need time to implement our plan, whatever the plan might be. Yeah. And I think he deserves enormous credit for having the courage of sticking to it because he could have easily thrown that out of the window and went a completely different way, but he didn't. The signings obviously helped him, and I think it'd be really, really interesting to see where he goes next season, where he takes the next step with Como, where the Como take an extra step. Now expectation is gonna.
He's a shareholder, pal. Can't see him leaving at this stage.
No. I don't mean leaving to a different club. I mean, where is the next step of this process of this journey that he's on?
I think they've laid foundations. We'll get into that, but just going back behind Emmet here, the birthday boy, the Mola shirt. This is the iconic one from their promotion year. In 2024 when they achieved it. Back then, Fumagalli and Summer were those January signings. This year, we'll go past the summer window with Belotti and that because some of those signings didn't work out as well. And that's where they made the decision, the intelligent decision process there to then go, you know what, these errors occurred, let's correct them with bringing in some other players where we think we need reinforcing at the time. And that's the luxury that they have. Obviously, when you have those funds that you can invest, smart signings. When you look at Serie A, we never see this with one of the smaller clubs where you can come in and do this. So this is kind of like a blueprint for other clubs that want to follow this.
But you also don't see them going, as Emmet said, turning to youth in January. You normally sign the veteran. People who have been there have done that.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're not going for Giao, who's 22, 23.
Yeah, I guess their veterans were Pep Reina in the summer.
Yeah.
Belotti is a veteran at 31.
Varane was experienced. Didn't work out, but...
And every club does that in the summer that's coming up from Serie B because you want that experience to help the youth. But they've gone from Fumagalli and Ensame to attacking options last January to Duvicas from Celta to come up for 13 million euros, Assane Diao for 12 million, Maxence Cacare, the French midfielder. I think he's a really good player.
Yeah.
But they've got that depth in the midfield. They had a few injuries. Still, Engelhardt and Dorsena and these other players that came in the summer with Paz. They let Aldero go out to Palermo on loan. They brought in Butez, some people might know him as, and some of these players were only 1 or 2 million only. I mean, still, it's a luxury because I don't think Lecce are going to spend. They'll take the money for selling players to Manchester United, but maybe not reinvest it the same way.
Yeah.
But it's a gamble, it's a risk, and I think you have to mitigate risks when you can, and it's about intelligent signings now. Where you bring in and you want to play a system under a progressive coach like Fabregas, I think some of these signings were extremely good, outstanding.
Yeah, I mean, Assane Diao was, as Dan said, he was unbelievable until he got injured. Even Jonathan Iacone, who signed on loan from Fiorentina, I'm a fan of him. He's inconsistent, but when he's on, he's very good. Yeah. And he's been more of an impact sub, but they've made the right signings at the right time.
But again, making that step up from Serie B to Serie A, again, the pace. Sometimes you're a product. Going back to your point where some Serie B players don't come up and make that impact in Serie A, it's because, like McTominay at Napoli, you're a product of who's around you sometimes.
Yeah.
And when you make that step up and some of the other players aren't performing, but then you can reinforce with the likes of Diao, who's going to take 2 players with him, might make some more room for Cutrone in the middle or Strefetto on the other wing. All of a sudden you've got space, you've got a tilt, whatever it is. You can get between the lines easier because Cacare's cleaning up balls and all of a sudden Paz has more room. I've seen plays where they'll come out on the counter-attack and Paz can have 40 metres to run before he distributes. Like the goal against Genoa was genius, the way that, out to Cutrone on the left wing, the little toe poke through, and Strefetto comes through and picks up the top corner. Those kind of goals, that's where you get that class above to go to the next level. So that's why they've stayed up with 4 games to go. They've achieved the Salvezza. Let's go to Harry's piece that he's put out on Destination Calcio this week. Fabregas's style, he talks about that. He talks about the how he's completely dedicated to the role. Every waking minute, he's dialed into the project. And I guess every coach is these days. You have to be. But still, working with the data team to instill that unity, the planning, the style, philosophy that's ingrained, those kind of things. He also mentions how Fabregas is no coach is a fan of defeat, but as a first year coach in Serie A, you'd think that you'd be thinking, I'll be happy with 13, 14 defeats. He doesn't take them well. He'll sit in silence on the plane, according to sources on the way back, and he'll just sit there and he wants to make it known he's not happy. He wants the players to feel it as well.
Yeah,
and that is because he's a World Cup champion, and that's what that brings.
That's what I found fascinating about him, because I think often world-class players struggle to become really good managers because they are so used to such high standards. Roy Keane being a prime example. I think he struggled as a manager because the players he was coaching did not live up to his standards, but because his standards were so high. And I think it's been interesting with Fabregas. Obviously, he's played under the likes of Pep, under the likes of Arsene Wenger. He's won the World Cup with Spain. He's won everything there is to win. It must be very difficult for him, with all due respect to common players, to go playing with the likes of Xavi and Iniesta and Thierry Henry, and then translate that as a manager. And it's one thing to tell them, I want you to do this with the ball. Quite in order to get them to do it.
And there's a reason why a lot of great players don't make great managers, is because they have a vision on the pitch that mere mortals can't see.
Yeah.
And they can't, as you said, transfer that to the players. And that's why you've seen even Diego Maradona wasn't a coach, because he could see things that other players can't. And I think it shouldn't be forgotten about too is that Fabregas, what's he, 37, 38? Yeah. Like, Serie A generally, you have to be of a certain vintage to coach in Serie A. He's by far the youngest coach in the league. And the fact to do this well in his first season in Serie A, that shouldn't be taken away either, even though he's got the distinguished career and he's won World Cups and Champions Leagues and European Championships.
He played Serie B for Como as well. Let's not forget that, pal.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, it shouldn't be taken away from the fact that he is still very young in his coaching career.
Yeah, I found him refreshing as well in the way he's been dealing with the media, exactly because of what you're saying. That he's not of the usual vintage that you'll expect Serie A managers to be. He doesn't pull any punches. He doesn't I don't think he plays the games that the Italian media would like him to play or would like managers to play. It's
started to change those games because the Italian media aren't used to the foreign coaches not giving into them like they used to.
No, definitely. But I think he's handled himself really well, when...
he's multilingual. He goes out there and speaks Italian.
Absolutely, yeah. And
then English.
When Como were under pressure, he just didn't cave into the external pressure and the criticism that was coming his way.
It's about self-belief, because if you have that instilled in you, well, I guess when the criticism comes, it deflects off you.
And that's the other side of the coin of him being such a world-class player, because you may have people writing the paper or radio phoning, putting him under pressure, but he could turn around saying, "This is not pressure.
Yeah.
I've won the World Cup. I've played in teams that have challenged for the league and the Champions League. So I know how to handle this."
Yeah, absolutely. So
you can see that he thinks about the game in a different way, because obviously we just mentioned about him being multilingual. I remember he was a BBC pundit for the last World Cup, and they were asking him for his insight on, I can't remember what specific game it was, but he broke it down into various stages, and he was impressed with this, and you could see his attention to detail, especially with the punditry that he was surrounded with. A lot of them are there for the vibes people, but you could see that Fabregas saw the game in a different light and broke it down. And he was properly analysing whatever game it was that he was there to.
He wasn't there to relive his World Cup glory, like the other players.
He actually offered insight, and I was like, he's definitely.
I found an incident with him very telling earlier this season. So we went to cover the game against Bologna in Como, and Como conceded 2 late goals to draw the game
from 2-0 up. Yeah,
from 2-0 up. And the post-match press conference, a local journalist went through a 5-minute
filibuster,
exactly. For want to know a better word, about
it's a lecture. It's not a question. It's a lecture.
Yeah, he basically lectured Fabregas about what Como had done wrong and where they'd gone wrong and what he should have done. They didn't actually do. And Fabregas' response was simply, it wasn't defensive. It was just like, okay, then is there a question coming at the end of this, or otherwise, I respect your opinion. You have your opinion, I'll have mine. You know, and I thought that was telling of his caliber as a manager and as a person as well, because another manager, particularly 37, 38, could have just sort of tried to defend his ideas. He felt like he didn't have to, because, you know, he will do the talking on the pitch, and he made that point that day, like, we're going to be doing our talking on the pitch. And I think that translates onto the players.
Yeah.
The confidence, as you were saying, the self-belief.
He's sure in his conviction
He's
on
sure.
what he wants
He
to do.
doesn't need to justify himself to the media or to anyone else.
And you can see that in the interview that we've done with him. Harry Slavin spoke to him early in the year. So go and check that out on our YouTube channel, also the DCTV app. Real desire to attract big talents coming this summer. I think that's what he's got. The fire in the belly, the leadership skills on full display this year. And I think now that has set a standard where, you know, to attract even Pep Reina, even though he's early 40s, to get a name like that, or a Varane, a Belotti, you'd have to be signing on to the project because you somewhat believe in that. Now, of course, they're going to be bit part players. Even said Gilberto, I guess if they didn't make some signings in January, he would have played a little bit more pending injuries. So they did bring in the experience. They may let one or two go. They brought in Dele Alli as well. But, you know, according to other sources, Marcus Rashford was a name that was tabled in the January window. Obviously, he was looking for a new challenge. He was on the outer, so maybe they were going to give him a go. But that is where they want to go. So that you would never associate the name Rashford. You never hear his name if you were the Lecce sporting director, for example, at their weekly meeting during the transfer window. But this is the ambition that they're showing, and I guess it is a reflection of where the ownership group are at. They've taken it from Serie D to Serie A, and now they want to go beyond.
And there was links to Theo Hernandez as well. If
Yeah,
They
it's
made a
true.
bid, actually. Apparently, they allegedly made the bid.
Well, apparently the bid
back,
was there,
yeah.
and he just simply said no.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, you're playing Champions League with Milan, and you know, the likes of Kyle Walker are
Not for
attracted
long.
there.
But the fact that they felt confident enough to even approach Milan about a deal speaks to the ambition.
But also, it's a signal to the agents of players. Hey, we're looking for players of this caliber. If they're willing, we'll accept them.
But it's also an interesting sort of paradox, because they've done so well by signing largely, I wouldn't say unknown players, but players that have been sort of flying under the radar for a bit. And I do wonder whether, like, yes, you want to have a sprinkle of stardust, of course, you know, come with the scenery they're in, and, you know, that we've seen, like, you know, celebrities attend the games. But I do wonder,
Like us.
is the likes of, you know, the likes of Rashford, for example, or the likes of, but maybe Theo Hernandez is a different, a slightly different comparison, not an exact comparison, because he plays in Serie A. Do you need to go after those players? Like, how much is too much stardust?
Yeah, there is a discussion to be had that maybe it upsets the dynamic
Yeah.
or the balance in the squad if you have
Well, that's the issue at Milan.
players like Nico
Too many
Paz
egos, yeah.
and Asana Dian. They're young, unpolished diamonds.
Yeah.
But they're still diamonds, where if you bring in a Theo Hernandez or Marcus Rashford, does it upset the squad
I'm
dynamic?
not saying that we're going to go down the Galacticos debate,
Yeah.
but it does have
Como
the
Galacticos, no? From Fumagalli to Theo Hernandez.
But
maybe?
you could see, I mean, like, even the likes of Dele Alli, I could see why, you know, they're playing without money there, effectively. But, I don't know, I think the Como success is going to be built on, like, signing the likes of Diao and Paz for the future, rather than the likes of Rashford. You know?
But that's why I'm so impressed by it, because no one saw the Caceres and the Pazes and Diao's coming. When I saw that Nico Paz was signed, I was thinking, this is great, because I'd seen him at Real Madrid and he'd scored in the Champions League against Napoli. Of course, he was a 5-minute, 10-minute player here and there, or he'd play in the Coppa, whatever. But still, the talent, that kind of talent being attracted to a newly promoted Italian club, it brings excitement.
Yeah.
And I knew the potential he had. And unless you'd really gone and looked at these young starlets that come off the benches for big clubs, you wouldn't know who he is. Like most people wouldn't have known who he was. And to go and get an Assane Diao, who'd only played, 13, 14 professional games in La Liga, scored a couple of goals this season, and then next thing he's on the plane to Como. To sell a player like that that's playing at, Betis, scoring against Barcelona, and then to bring him to Como, there has to be a level of of convincing.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
you speak to their families, you speak to the fathers, you speak to the mothers, you bring over. It's a whole package you need to sell, and there must be belief in this project.
Which is why I think the players with names like the like of Rashford, the like of Hernandez, if they were to come in, while I'm not quite sure they made the disrupt the dynamic, the Como have at the minute, but they're gonna. I have a feeling they're gonna be used as much of a pull for other players. As you said, look, like if you're thinking like signing for a couple of different clubs in a certain club, tells you, look, we're signing Marcus Rashford for Manchester United. This is their intent. Then you'll notice, if you know what I mean. So I think that is a sort of twofold.
Yeah, I think they need to continue signing smart, not headline. Say someone like, if they're looking at a new striker for next season, say someone like Moise Kean, still young, scoring the goals for Fiorentina.
Is he achievable?
I mean, if they're talking about Rashford, I don't see, Rashford would cost more
What I mean
wages.
is he's in the first year of his contract. That's what I mean by achievable.
Well, he has a 52 million release clause. So if Como want to stomp up, I mean, Theo Hernandez, we're talking 45 million. So it's like, well, you just push another 7 out and get. But what I'm saying is, they need to continue to sign smart and not.
Yeah, it's the old adage, you can't start running before you've actually started.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's my point. I want to follow up on that because for me, I like the model of a Sassuolo. Como's model is good, but the Sassuolo, the Atalanta model, where you build slowly. And for me, like getting another striker in, they've got Duvicas is good. He's scored a couple of goals. But for me, signing smart is going around to some of the smaller clubs, especially the ones that may go down. And say, you know what, Caprari, I might take you. Kristovic, I might take you. Buzio or whoever from Venezia.
Exactly.
Or you go down to Serie B and you take it one of the best players there, whether it's Ranocchia, who's been phenomenal this season, whether it's Poyampolo, you might want to bring him in.
It's time Yamello got some Serie A action.
Yes,
Pietro
Yamello.
It's time.
I would take him.
Yeah.
Look, at this point, if Italy squad needs him in June, bring him in. Serie B top scorer at this point with Loriente might have taken over on the weekend.
I think he's got 16, Loriente's got 17. Yeah. But even so, I mean, bring Yamello to just bring him in, bring him to Serie A. Get him to play Serie A and Serie B.
He has played before and he scored in Serie A. I think
know.
he scored against Inter. Let's go to a few of these final points on Como and Fabregas. The focus away from the pitch obviously is improving as well because they're investing money in their media center now. They've got Mozzate, their training center. They've improved that. Now they used to train just wherever. They used to find a training field. Sometimes the Senigallia was it, or another field, and that's where Fabregas started. Moreno Longo had those facilities as well when he was coach, and Fabregas took over from him. In the space of 18 months, he's now achieved the salvation in Serie A. He said that he knew that this was a journey, a real journey, in my opinion, for Fabregas and for Como, and it's been one where I feel like everyone's signed on to that project. It's like a Conte project, isn't it, where you have to have that belief, and now having achieved what they've done, they could finish 10th.
Yeah. They've won 4 games in a row. Yeah. Like, they're finishing the season very strong.
1952 was the last time they'd won 3 in a row.
Put it this way, you wouldn't want to be
in Serie A, that is
going to come on the final day of the season and needing a win.
Yeah.
And that is Inter this season. So I think it's Napoli, Cagliari at the other end.
Yeah.
But, the future ambition, how far can they go in the next 3 years? I mean, they want to build a stadium or redevelop this stadium here.
Well, look, I mean, we were saying this Fabregas said the money doesn't matter. I sort of get why he's saying that, but money does matter.
I think that's because people will throw daggers and say, well, you got to achieve the Salvezza with 4 games to go because of how much you spent in the January window. But I think that goes to show for any club that succeeds.
No, sure.
I mean,
you've got to be spending it smartly. The next step for Como is, I will think that if you can finish in the top half next season and then potentially have a crack at the European, get qualified for Europe, maybe the season after that.
Yeah.
There's no reason why Como can't do what Bologna have done this season and make the Coppa Italia final next season.
Yeah. Well, look, Bologna under Mihailovic 3-4 years ago with the likes of Jerry Schouten and Svanberg and them, that's where I see this Como project because I watched a lot of Bologna back then and they would go there and win some, lose some, draw some, and it was happy-go-lucky, sort of that bottom half of the table. If they come up to 11th or 12th, it's a good season at Bologna, and that's where Como's at already.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that they'll do better than what they've done this season, next season. I'm just saying the project's there.
I think
they're building towards something.
I think much will depend on their summer transfer window and the kind of business they do. You know, as Dan said, I do think a top 10 finish next season is very achievable if they get this transfer window right. They keep Nico Paz, they keep Diao, they add a couple of more just very good signings, more youngsters that, you know, more unpolished diamonds. And I don't see why a top 10 finish is more than achievable.
Especially when you've got the nucleus of the team now. So you can go and, you know, just say Orsolini wanted to leave Bologna for a new challenge. I think someone like him.
That goes back to my original point that I made at the top of the show, that, you know, in January they have effectively set themselves up for better and bigger things this summer. You know, they didn't have to sign players just to avoid relegation. They were smart enough to sign players to build a platform, steal a march on their rivals.
Where would you sign someone for? Maybe in the centre of defence? Somewhere?
I will say that maybe another centre back, and I think you'll need,
because they've done well with the flanks. They brought in Smolcic, they brought in Valle, they brought in.
I think you need an alternative or a support to Cutrone up front, because I don't think Belotti is going to cut it, to be honest with you.
Well, Belotti, look, he'll be back in the summer, no doubt. It depends what happens to where he wants to go. But Duvicas, Cutrone, you've got Diao, who'll be fit and firing at 20 years of age.
Yeah, I think it's imperative that they keep Nico Paz. Yeah, and I think it would actually be better for his development if he stayed another year. Como, because you've seen it so many times over the years. Players of that age, 19, 20, they leave, they go to a big club, they get lost in the shuffle, and then their career just vanishes or not, declines rapidly. I think for Nico Paz, he should stay at Como. Como will get the best out of him. He knows Fabregas, he knows the system, and at that age, it's better just to stay where you are for another couple of years. Then maybe
Dele Alli, he's got an opportunity in the next 3-4 games to do something.
I mean, if he has a good pre-season under his belt, I think that's what Cesc said a while back. It's more he was a signing for next season.
But he's already made his debut. If he didn't get that red card against Milan, he probably would have played more often in between where we are now.
I do think the pre-season is crucial for him. You need to get
surely some match time in the last 2-3 games is crucial.
If you want to improve. When you get a pre-season, you get just the fact of having a pre-season, being around the group, not just being parachuted in as he was, just with a few months left.
Yeah, I think some players will build on trust being put into them. And I know that Fabregas has already done that because he made his debut against Milan, of all places, at the Giuseppe Meazza. So we know that he's been given the chance. Of course, maybe you want to go out there and redeem yourself. Surely he's got some hunger in there to go out there and perform well, knowing that he got the red card. Now, he didn't mean to do it, obviously. No player does. They don't want to go out there in their league debut.
I mean, that delay is it's not. It's a gamble, yes, but Como have got nothing to lose with him.
But they've got to play him before the end of the season, in my opinion.
Yeah, give him a couple of games. There's nothing
there. There you go, Cesc, birthday boy's giving you advice.
Yeah.
So let's finish it up there. Of course, they got Thierry Henry, more celebrity appearances next season, obviously. So it feels like it's getting that momentum away from the pitch, the whole lure of going to the lakeside city, the holiday feel when you go there, shoehorn in a bit of football, lakeside stadium, beautiful restaurants, and I've seen those plans now. They've got the visual concepts up with restaurants and bars and all that dotted along with the marina at the lake. So yeah, it looks phenomenal. So we'll see how they go with that. They want that to be finished by 2028. Let's finish up. Is this a blueprint that other clubs can follow in Serie A, Serie B, Serie D even? I mean, obviously, you need a plan, not just money, to get out of Serie D and Serie G, because you can't go spending. No player's going to go to Serie D for you.
You can follow a blueprint, but ultimately, you need to have deep pockets.
Yeah. Yeah. And you need an ownership with a good vision.
Yeah. But even if you've got deep pockets, let's look at Redbird, for example. They got deep pockets, not going that well. Is it better to do what Como's done, their ownership group, or what the Milan ownership group has done?
Well, I think it's not. I don't think it's a good comparison. I would say you could probably compare it between what Como have done and the likes of Torino have done, for example. They've come up, but now they're sort of stalling. They're there, they're not. You can't see them moving forward. You can't see them moving backwards.
Yeah. They're always 10th, 11th,
they're always
12th.
10th, yeah. So that's the key, I think, with Como is going to be is a gradual sort of building up process to success, be it European qualification, be it the odd Coppa Italia run. as well as having like a new ground and everything else? Or is it just a case of we're going to secure Serie A status for the next couple of years and we are not going to show any ambition? So I think the jury is out. I do think the Como are far better placed than majority of clubs.
Let's talk about
within that
Venezia,
range.
because they're another destination that is, it's tourist oriented. People love going there, and what Niederauer and that ownership group, maybe where they've failed, they need to look at what Como's done.
Yeah.
So that is maybe a better comparison, because when you make that decision to come in and buy Como, you obviously look at the overall package.
Yeah.
You don't just say, I want to be in Serie D or I want to be in Serie G, because
But I think going back to the ownership, the American mentality of owning football teams is very different to what's going on in Como. The American mindset is, well, we need profits. That's what you're seeing with Redbird. If there was a balance sheet Scudetto, Milan would win every year, but it doesn't translate to trophies on the pitch. So I think it's not right to compare Redbird to Como's ownership, because
I'm saying if you were a financial advisor and you were going to, someone came to you with, a set amount of money, would you say go and do what they did or them? Where would you be? Because Milan, not sure they're
it's difficult
that
though,
profitable.
because Milan, with Como, you want to establish yourself in Serie A. With Milan, you obviously need to challenge for trophies. It's a different dynamic.
It's also about the ability to plan, because I think there's a different
Put it this
goal
way,
sheet.
Yeah.
Let's talk about when you buy Milan
Would I
compared
be
to a small club.
surprised to see the likes of Como being mentioned in the same bracket as Lazio and Roma in a couple of years? So that sort of couple of steps below.
Fiorentina, Atalanta.
I think that's where they're aiming to be.
Yeah.
Well, lots of foreign ownership now. We've spoken about that on previous pods. If you haven't engaged with us, get onto TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and X also. We're always on there. Let's just acknowledge the fact Como have done quite well. 4 rounds to go. The Salvezza, the future. We'll see how they go about it, guys. Thanks.